Have you ever woken up in a strange place, confused about where you are? Now imagine not even remembering who you are. Today's thrilling story takes us into the mind of a man who has lost his memory and finds himself trapped in a mysterious house with no idea how he got there or why he's being held captive. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to LMJ English, where we learn English through captivating stories. I'm your host, and today we're diving into The Forgotten Identity, a tale of mystery, suspense, and unexpected twists that will keep you on the edge of your seat while helping you improve your English vocabulary and comprehension. Before we begin this exciting journey, don't forget to click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our engaging stories that make learning English both fun and effective. Now, let's unlock the mystery of our protagonist's forgotten identity together. A room with no exit. The man opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the soft light streaming through the window. His head was pounding with a dull, persistent ache. Where is he? He looked around, taking in his surroundings. He was lying on a comfortable bed in a beautifully furnished room. There was an expensive-looking antique chair in one corner and a polished wooden table near the window. The room had an air of old-world elegance about it, yet something felt deeply wrong. He tried to sit up, wincing as the movement intensified the pain in his head. Through the window, he could see nothing but a green field with the sun shining brightly upon it. The pastoral scene should have been calming, but only increased his sense of unease. From somewhere in the house, the delicate notes of Mozart floated through the air, the beautiful music at odds with his growing anxiety. "Why am I here?" he whispered to himself, trying to remember how he had arrived at this place. His mind was blank, an empty canvas with no traces of memory. The more he tried to remember, the more his head hurt. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up carefully. He was wearing gray trousers and a gray shirt, but no shoes. Strange. He walked to the door and turned the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked from the outside. Panic began to rise in his chest as he moved to the window and tried to open it. It too was sealed shut. He was trapped. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him of his hunger, and his throat felt parched. He searched the room for food or water, but found nothing. The only items on the table were a pen and some sheets of blank paper. He picked up the pen, turning it over in his hand, wondering if he should write something. But what would he write? He couldn't even remember his own name. "Who am I?" he said aloud, his voice sounding strange and unfamiliar to his ears. He closed his eyes, concentrating hard, tried to recall anything about himself, his name, his home, his family, but there was nothing, just a vast, terrifying emptiness where his memories should be. The pain in his head intensified to an almost unbearable level, and he sank back onto the bed, exhaustion overwhelming him. As darkness crept into the corners of his consciousness, one thought remained. Something was very wrong, and he was in danger. But from what? And why couldn't he remember? These questions followed him into a restless sleep where fragments of dreams, a field, binoculars, the sound of a dog barking, floated just beyond his grasp. The man in black. Morning light filtered through the window when he next opened his eyes. The headache had subsided, but the gnawing hunger and thirst had grown worse. He was still wearing the same gray clothes, still locked in the same beautiful room. The Mozart piece had started playing again, its familiar notes now seeming like a calculated part of his captivity. As he sat up, rubbing his temples, he heard footsteps approaching outside the door. His muscles tensed as the lock clicked and the door swung open. A man entered dressed entirely in black. Black trousers, black shirt, black shoes polished to a high shine. His face was angular and expressionless, his eyes cold and assessing as they swept over the room and settled on the prisoner. "Hello," the man in black said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "How's your head?" "My head." The prisoner touched the back of his skull instinctively. "It's okay. It doesn't hurt now." "Good." The man nodded, standing just inside the doorway, maintaining a careful distance. "Where am I?" the prisoner asked, his voice betraying his desperation for answers. A small smile played on the man's lips. "You don't know?" "No." The admission felt like surrender. "Are you thirsty?" the man asked, changing the subject smoothly. "Yes, I'm hungry and thirsty," the prisoner replied, hoping that cooperating might earn him some information along with sustenance. The man stepped forward, producing a glass from behind his back. "Drink this." The prisoner took the glass hesitantly. The liquid inside was clear like water, but something about the way the man was watching him made him suspicious. Still, his thirst was overwhelming. He raised the glass to his lips and drank deeply. The liquid was cool and slightly bitter, but it soothed his parched throat. Almost immediately, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision began to blur, and his limbs felt heavy. "Oh," he mumbled, "I'm very tired again." He tried to fight the sudden drowsiness, but it was too powerful. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the man in black watching him with clinical interest, as if he were an experiment rather than a person. When he woke again, the room was dark. He fumbled for the light switch and found it near the bed. In the sudden brightness, he noticed a glass on the table that hadn't been there before. Driven by thirst, he drank from it without thinking, too desperate for relief to consider the consequences. The door opened again, and the man in black returned, this time with a more intimidating presence. "I'm going to ask you some questions," he stated coldly. "Who are you?" "I don't know," the prisoner answered truthfully. "What's your name?" "I don't know." The frustration and fear in his voice were genuine. The man's eyes narrowed. "I'm going to ask you again. What's your name?" "I can't tell you," the prisoner said, his voice rising in panic. "I don't know. Where are you from?" "I don't know." The man produced another glass. "Drink this." This time, the prisoner hesitated. "No, I can't." The man's expression hardened. "You're going to drink it. You understand." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at the prisoner's head. With trembling hands, the prisoner took the glass and drank, knowing he had no choice. The room spun around him, and once again, darkness claimed him. Fragments of memory. The next time he woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and the room was quiet. To his surprise, there was a tray of food and a pitcher of water on the table. His body moved almost automatically, driven by hunger and thirst. He ate quickly, savoring the plain bread and cheese, drinking the water in large gulps. As his physical needs were satisfied, his mind began to clear. His head no longer hurt, and for the first time since waking in this strange room, he felt alert. The sound of approaching footsteps made him freeze mid-bite. The door opened, and the man in black entered again, his posture rigid, his eyes cold and calculating. "Do you want to talk?" the man asked, his tone suggesting this wasn't really a question but a command. "About what?" the prisoner asked cautiously. "Okay, who are you?" The man's voice was sharp. "Who are you?" the prisoner countered, a sudden surge of defiance rising within him. The man's face darkened. I'm asking the questions. Why are you here? You tell me. The prisoner replied, unable to stop himself. The man laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed in the room. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and struck the prisoner across the face with the back of his hand. The blow was swift and powerful, sending the prisoner reeling backward. We're going to start again, the man said calmly, as if nothing had happened. Who are you? I can't remember, the prisoner said, tasting blood in his mouth. Oh, don't hit me. But the man struck him again, harder this time. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room, locking the door behind him. The prisoner sat on the edge of the bed, his face throbbing with pain. He reached up to touch his head and felt a raised bump on the back of his skull. The bump, something about it triggered a flash of memory, a brief, vivid image that burst into his consciousness. He was lying in a field, concealed beneath the broad branches of an oak tree. In his hands were binoculars, and he was watching a house, this house. It was a beautiful old building with ivy climbing its stone walls. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the scene. He was watching intently, waiting for something or someone. Then there was a noise behind him, a twig snapping, leaves rustling. He turned to see a man with a large dog. The man was holding a gun. Before he could react, the man struck him hard on the head with the butt of the gun. Pain exploded through his skull, and everything went black. The memory ended there, leaving him with more questions than answers. Why was he watching the house? Who was he? Was he a policeman on surveillance? A spy gathering intelligence? And who was the man who had attacked him? Was it the same man in black who now kept him prisoner, or was someone else entirely? He touched the bump again, as if physical contact with the injury might unlock more memories. Nothing came, but now he had something concrete to hold on to, a starting point. He had been watching this house from the field outside, and someone had discovered him and attacked him. That's how he ended up here, with a head injury and memory loss. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself, I'm going to remember more. He lay back on the bed, his mind racing with the implications of what he had remembered. Something was happening in this house, something important enough that people were willing to commit violence to protect its secrecy. And somehow he was involved. The key to freedom. The next day brought another visit from the man in black, who entered the room with the same cold, calculating demeanor. Well, how are you today? He asked, his tone falsely conversational. I'm okay, the prisoner replied cautiously. Can you remember anything? The question had an edge to it. Yes, a little. The prisoner decided to be honest, hoping it might lead to more information. The man's eyes narrowed. Who are you working for? I don't know. Why are you watching us? The man's voice grew sharper. I don't know, the prisoner repeated. The man took a step closer, his presence menacing. Who are you? Tell me, then maybe I can help you remember. The prisoner met his gaze steadily. Very clever. I can't tell you anything. It was the truth, but he could see the man didn't believe him. After the man left, another memory surfaced, more detailed this time. He was watching the house in the evening, wearing a blue coat for camouflage against the darkening sky. Lights were on in the house, casting yellow rectangles on the lawn. A white Jaguar pulled up the driveway, and two people got out, carrying a box between them. He was watching them carefully through his binoculars when the noise came from behind him, followed by the searing pain in his head. As he sat contemplating this new fragment of memory, he heard voices outside his door. They were speaking in low tones, but in the quiet of the room, he could make out their words. Well, he's going to talk, a voice said. Not the man in black, but someone else. Maybe he can't remember anything because of the bump on his head. What about the drinks? The man in black's voice was unmistakable. No, the drinks aren't helping us. Okay, 2 days more, then that's it. We haven't got any more time. How much does he know? That's the important thing. The concern in the voice was palpable. There was the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. The prisoner held his breath, expecting them to enter, but instead he heard the key turning, then footsteps moving away. They had locked the door from the outside and left. But something caught his attention. They had left the key in the lock. 2 days more, and then what? He didn't want to find out. Looking around the room, his gaze fell on the pen and papers on the table. A plan began to form in his mind. Moving quietly to the table, he took a sheet of paper and slid it slowly under the door, pushing it with careful fingers until most of it was on the other side. Then he took the pen and, kneeling by the door, inserted it into the keyhole, poking at the key on the other side. He worked patiently, his breath held, until he heard a soft clink. The key had fallen. "Is it on the paper?" he whispered to himself, anxiety coursing through him. Slowly, very slowly, he pulled the paper back under the door. His heart leaped when he saw the key resting on the edge of the paper. He had done it. With trembling hands, he picked up the key and inserted it into the lock from his side. It turned smoothly, and for the first time since he had awakened in this room, the door opened at his touch. He peered out into a corridor, elegant and empty, its walls adorned with framed paintings. It was quiet. The Mozart that had been his constant companion had stopped. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the room, the key clutched tightly in his hand. Freedom was within his grasp, but he knew he needed to be extremely careful. The people who had kept him prisoner were dangerous, and he still didn't know why they had taken him or what they intended to do when their 2 days more were up. Unveiling the truth. The corridor stretched before him, its polished wooden floor gleaming in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through tall windows. It was a beautiful house, even more impressive than he had glimpsed through his binoculars. He moved silently, his stocking feet making no sound on the floor, the key still clutched in his hand like a talisman. From somewhere in the house, the Mozart music had started playing again, its elegant notes floating through the air. At the end of the corridor, he could see a grand staircase leading down to the entrance hall. He could hear voices from below, people talking, the clink of glasses. He couldn't risk going downstairs. Instead, he began trying the doors that lined the corridor. The first few opened into bedrooms, luxurious and unoccupied. In one, he noticed a telephone on the bedside table. He filed that information away. It might be his best chance to get help. He continued his exploration, opening door after door, until he came to one that revealed something extraordinary. The room beyond was filled with paintings, not the decorative kind that adorned the corridor walls, but masterpieces. He recognized the distinctive styles immediately: Picasso's, Rembrandt's, Van Gogh's. They weren't hanging on the walls, but were stacked carefully against them, some still in crates, others wrapped in protective coverings. One painting in particular caught his eye, a Picasso that he recognized from news reports. It had been stolen from a London art gallery months ago, the theft making headlines across the country. The painting was worth millions, and here it was, along with dozens of other priceless works. "They're thieves," he whispered to himself, the realization dawning. Art thieves. The people who held him captive weren't just ordinary criminals. They were high-level art thieves, dealing in millions of pounds worth of stolen masterpieces. But that still didn't explain who he was or why he had been watching the house. Was he a detective tracking him down? A rival thief? He closed the door quietly, his mind racing with possibilities. He needed to get help, and quickly. Remembering the telephone, he made his way back to the bedroom where he had seen it. The number for emergency services was printed on a card next to the phone. Bradstreet 35972. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the receiver and dialed 999. "Please," he whispered urgently when the operator answered. "Fire, ambulance, or police?" "Police, quickly," he said, his voice barely audible. "Bradstreet 35972. I'm a prisoner here. I can't get out. The house is full of stolen paintings. Come quickly." "What's your name?" the operator asked. "Come quickly. This is Bradstreet 35972, he repeated, panic rising in his voice. But before he could say more, he heard footsteps in the corridor. He replaced the receiver quickly and looked around for a place to hide. From outside the room, he could hear voices. "We'll open the door. I can't find the key. Come on, I can't find it. There's another key in the kitchen. Get it right? 5 minutes." He could hear one set of footsteps moving away while another approached the room where he had been held. "What? He isn't here, but the door's locked." "Find him," came the command, harsh and frightening. "And take your gun. And this time, finish him. You understand?" "Okay, I'm going." The prisoner's heart pounded in his chest as he heard doors opening and closing along the corridor. The man was searching for him, room by room, getting closer. Had the police receive his call? Will they come in time? Then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of police sirens growing louder. Several cars, from the sound of it, pulling up outside the house. "It's the police," he heard someone downstairs exclaim. "What do they want?" "Don't take the gun with you," another voice cautioned. He heard footsteps hurrying downstairs, and then voices in the entrance hall below. "Good evening, Inspector. What can I do for you?" "We want to look around the house," came a new voice, authoritative and official. "We're looking for some paintings." "Look, there's nothing here." "Nothing? Well, look then." "But why?" "A telephone call." "A telephone call about some paintings? From?" "We don't know." "You don't know? Well, Inspector, the paintings are up here. I can show you. Follow me." The prisoner remained hidden, hardly daring to breathe, as footsteps ascended the stairs and moved along the corridor. He heard the door to the room with the paintings being opened, followed by exclamations of surprise and the crackle of police radios. 10 minutes later, he watched from his hiding place as the man and woman who owned the house were led away in handcuffs to waiting police cars. Only then did he emerge, still unsure of his identity, but relieved that the immediate danger had passed. Eddie Hampton. As he stepped in the corridor, a police officer turned and saw him. The officer's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed in what looked like a mixture of surprise and amusement. "Well, Eddie, this is a surprise," the officer said, shaking his head. "Eddie," the name meant nothing to him. "Is that my name?" "Eddie, come on," the officer said, clearly not believing him. "No, I can't remember," he insisted, touching the bump on his head. "I can't remember my name." The officer gave him a long look, then said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "Eddie. Eddie Hampton." The name still didn't trigger any memories. "What am I doing here?" he asked, desperate for answers. He began telling the officer everything he could remember. The field, the binoculars, the bump on his head, being held prisoner, the drinks that made him sleep, the escape with the paper and key. The officer listened, his expression changing from skepticism to amusement to something like grudging respect. When he finished, the officer was actually laughing. "Okay, I get it. You're Eddie Hampton. But who is Eddie Hampton? The officer shook his head. Eddie, you aren't a policeman, that's for sure. Then who am I? And what am I doing here? His frustration was mounting. The officer's smile faded a little. I don't know exactly what you were doing here, he admitted, but I can tell you something. What? Eddie Hampton's a criminal, a thief. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't a detective or a spy. He was a criminal himself. The officer continued, seeing his shock. Not a big thief like those two people with their famous paintings. No, you're a small thief, Eddie. You steal from houses, televisions, radios, videos, hi-fis, a little money sometimes. You're small time. The words sank in slowly. He was Eddie Hampton, a petty thief. Not a hero, not a detective, just a common criminal who had stumbled onto something much bigger than his usual targets. The irony of it wasn't lost on him. A thief who had helped catch thieves. He looked at the officer, expecting to be arrested himself, but instead, the man simply patted him on the shoulder. But thank you for your help, the officer said, and there was genuine gratitude in his voice. Eddie Hampton stood in the corridor of the beautiful old house, surrounded by police officers cataloging the recovered masterpieces, and felt a strange sense of accomplishment wash over him. He might be a criminal, but today, whether by accident or fate, he had done something good. He had helped recover millions of pounds worth of stolen art, even if he had done so while trying to save his own skin. His memories still hadn't fully returned, but he had discovered something perhaps more valuable, a new perspective. As he watched the police officer's work, he wondered if perhaps this strange twist of fate might offer him a chance to change his path, to become something more than just Eddie Hampton, small-time thief. The bump on his head had taken his memories, but perhaps it had also given him an opportunity, a blank slate, a chance to rewrite his story. As he was led from the house by the police officer, Eddie Hampton smiled for the first time since waking in that locked room. Whatever came next, it would be different. He would make sure of that. And that brings us to the end of our thrilling journey with Eddie Hampton, a small-time thief who ironically became the hero in a high-stakes art theft case. Isn't it fascinating how life can take unexpected turns? And sometimes our true identities are revealed in the most surprising ways. I hope you enjoyed The Forgotten Identity and picked up some useful English vocabulary and expressions along the way. Stories like these not only entertain us, but also help us practice our language skills in a natural, engaging context. If you found this story interesting, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends who are also learning English. Your support helps our channel grow and allows us to continue bringing you quality content for language learning. Don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts about the story or any words you found challenging. Was he ending what you expected? Did you guess Eddie's true identity before it was revealed? Thank you so much for joining me today on LMJ English. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notification bell to be the first to know when we upload new stories. Until next time, keep reading, keep listening, and keep improving your English. Key vocabulary from The Forgotten Identity. Amnesia. Noun, a condition in which memory is lost. Example: the bump on his head caused temporary amnesia, and he couldn't remember his own name. Captive. Noun, a person who is imprisoned or confined. Example: he realized he was a captive in the beautiful old house with no way to escape. Surveillance. Noun, close observation of a person or place, especially one who is suspected of wrongdoing. Example: he was conducting surveillance on the house from the field with his binoculars. Binoculars. Noun, an optical instrument with a lens for each eye, used for viewing distant objects. Example: through his binoculars, he could clearly see the two people carrying a box into the house. Interrogation: noun, the process of questioning a person, often aggressively, to obtain information. Example: the man in black conducted daily interrogations, always asking the same questions about his identity. Persistent: adjective, continuing firmly despite opposition or difficulty. Example: he had a persistent headache that wouldn't go away since waking up in the strange room. Masterpiece: noun, a work of outstanding artistry or skill. Example: the room was filled with stolen masterpieces from famous artists like Picasso and Van Gogh. Fragments: noun, small parts broken off or detached from something. Example: only fragments of his memory were returning, not enough to understand the full picture. Revelation: noun, a surprising and previously unknown fact that has been disclosed. Example: the revelation that he was actually a small-time thief named Eddie Hampton shocked him. Talisman: noun, an object thought to have magic powers and to bring good luck. Example: he clutched the key in his hand like a talisman as he explored the corridor. Menacing: adjective, suggesting the presence of danger, threatening. Example: the man in black had a menacing presence that filled the room whenever he entered. Parchment: noun, very dry and extremely thirsty. Example: his throat felt parched after days with little water in the locked room. Defiance: noun, open resistance, bold disobedience. Example: in a sudden surge of defiance, he dared to ask the man who he was instead of answering questions. Irony: noun, a state of affairs that appears deliberately contrary to what one expects. Example: the irony of a thief helping to catch bigger thieves was not lost on him. Surveillance: noun, close observation, especially of a suspected person. Example: he was conducting surveillance of a house when he was discovered and attacked. Pristine: adjective, in perfect condition, as if new, immaculate. Example: the corridor was pristine, with polished wooden floors that gleamed in the sunlight. Glimpse: noun, a momentary or partial view. Example: he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window, but didn't recognize himself. Disoriented: adjective, having lost one's sense of direction, position, or relationship with one's surroundings. Example: he felt completely disoriented when he first woke up in the strange room. Captivity: noun, the condition of being imprisoned or confined. Example: during his captivity, he was given mysterious drinks that made him drowsy. Perspective: noun, a particular attitude toward or way of regarding something, a point of view. Example: the experience gave him a new perspective on his life as a criminal.